Now, I'm about to say something to you that I think for some of you, it's probably going to be a bit controversial. The best teacher for any child to learn the valuable lesson of knowing how to control your emotions can only come from a man. Now, for some of you, I know you already getting ready to jump into the comment section or already getting ready to scroll. But before you do that, I want you to hear out everything I'm saying. Now, men come with this innate ability. And now when I say men, let me be clear. I'm talking men who do not have any kind of brokenness issues. In other words, they themselves was raised in a very stable home, stable environment with both a father and a mother that do not have any kind of significant issues. I'm talking about if you have a man that grew up in a situation like that, the chances of them being able to maximize their innate ability to be able to navigate through emotions and to stay focused on whatever it is that they got to do while knowing how to keep their emotions in check is very, very high. This has been proven over and over again. That's what happens when you're dealing with a real man. And so what better teacher to learn from than somebody who has an innate ability to know how to take their emotions when something arises, be it a problem or sudden situation or where you got to make a decision that it pulls on your emotions a lot. What better teacher you can have than a stable-minded man? That's the best teacher as far as I'm concerned, and I think history proves itself. But when you have a situation where men have grown up in an unstable environment, meaning that maybe most of their rearing came from their mother, or the father was there, but he wasn't really there. And, when you have situations like that, then it opens up to a lot of other situations, mainly resulting in men not really getting the full lesson of learning how to control their emotions. Now, before we continue here, like I said, we're talking about situations where a man has grown up in an environment where there's a stable situation, right, in their home. So when they grow up and become men, they can continue that legacy. All right. Now, there's another side to this. That's why I'm saying, hold on, hear the whole story. Now, I will also say this. The best teacher for any child to learn the value of their emotions and how to be in tune with their environment and be very discerning are women. I mean, it's just period. I mean, hands down, women have this innate ability to be very sensitive to their environment, even though a lot of times you'll hear people say women are just emotional, and they say it in such a way that's almost kind of derogatory. When people portray it as that, what they're really showing is that they really don't have the full picture of the value that women bring to the table when it does come to emotions. The emotions that women come prepackaged with are very valuable, especially when we're children, when we're babies. And making sure that, and you really see this heightened, especially when women are pregnant. You know how there's certain things they're like, well, turn the music down, or, that smell is just too much or whatever. These are blessings because what that woman her body is doing is preparing the optimal environment for this child to come into. And, if you flip to a man in a situation like that, they're going to be like, listen, you got a bed, you got, what food do you want or whatever. And we're just so focused on solutions based, but there's another side that is much needed. And that is being discerning, being sensitive, and kind of really knowing how to read the room. And that is a valuable thing that we all need, regardless if you're a man or a woman. We all need that. Emotions in of itself are a blessing. It's a great thing. We all have emotions. And as I've said many times before, emotions are what makes who we are. That's how our identity. In fact, much of our belief systems, regardless of what the belief systems are oftentimes built on emotions, on your emotions. And so this is a very important point to understand. It's not all just logic. A lot of times we'll just say it's mostly logic, but the emotional part also plays a very critical role in building what we believe and why we believe what we believe. That's why you see oftentimes when people are debating or whatever on different topics, they're very passionate. Well, that's the emotional part coming out, and you need those emotions to be able to best convey what the points that you're trying to make. So emotions are a very important thing. So on one hand, again, we have men who are, when it comes to being in tune with our emotions, we're kind of low on that, but we are emotional on people, but when it comes to being able to navigate through that, men tend to have the upper hand on that, so to speak. It's more of an intuitive thing. Women, on the other hand, it's kind of the opposite when it comes to being in tune with their emotions, being very in tune with the environment, knowing how to read the room, all that kind of stuff. That women, they don't even have to go to school for that. I mean, it's just innate. It's a wonderful thing that both sides have. So it's never a competition or anything like that. They're designed to work together. So now, taking all that in consideration, this is why for me, anytime I see these stories of young people that just losing their minds over the simplest of things, I mean, just whatever it is. I mean, you just are arguing over, how you looked at me, or I saw what you posted on Instagram, or, why you do this or that or whatever.
You got me wooded?
Next tonight, authorities in Ohio say the man who allegedly rammed his car into a sheriff's deputy, killing him, did so intentionally. The suspect appearing in court today is the father of an 18-year-old killed in an officer-involved shooting on Thursday. The suspect charged with aggravated murder. Here's ABC's Christiane Cordero.
Tonight, authorities say the shooting of an 18-year-old captured on police body cam is connected to the death of an Ohio deputy after that teen's father allegedly hit him with a car a day later. Prosecutors say the attack was calculated and premeditated. Cincinnati PD responding to reports of a stolen Kia at an apartment building Thursday morning. 4 suspects then fleeing police. Among them, 18-year-old Ryan Hinton. Body camera shows Hinton fall as he tries to run away. Police say they heard a metal clinking sound they believe was a gun.
He's got a gun! He's got a gun! On your right! He's got a gun!
As Hinton emerges from behind a dumpster, authorities say another officer firing 4 or 5 shots.
The officer says that he saw the suspect point the firearm at him.
Yes.
Just 6 seconds passed between when police arrived and gunshots rang out. Officials say they tried administering medical aid. Hinton was struck twice and died. Investigators saying this gun was recovered from the scene allegedly found in Hinton's possession. On Friday, a day after that shooting and 2 hours after the Hinton family reviewed the body camera footage, according to the family's lawyer, a driver crashing a car into a Hamilton County deputy directing traffic near a commencement ceremony, killing him. The suspect, authorities say, is Ryan Hinton's father, Rodney Hinton Jr.
And these aren't just arguments. I mean, a lot of times these things end up where someone's getting killed. And it's not just young people, but we also see middle-aged people, carrying on like this. And even older people we'll see flipping off over the most simplest of things. And when I see that, when people just flip off and automatically go to 10 and they just immediately jump on in their emotions, what that tells, what I see, I'm just telling you, when I look at that, I see that there are lessons that were not taught or passed down by either the father or the mother or both. Like, remember now, take in consideration what I just explained to you. Again, you have a child, a teenager, they're in high school, somebody steps on their sneaker or whatever like that, and immediately this teenager gets very angry and upset and say, what are you looking at? Why did you do that? That kind of thing. and immediately he's jumping in their emotions. There's no guard. There's nothing there in that child's life to tell him, hey, listen, you need to back down. It wasn't that serious. It wasn't that serious. It just, okay, just tell them don't do it again, and that's it. But when they immediately flip to ready to fight and ready to battle, what that tells me is that there was an absence. To that degree, the man was not fully present. Okay? Now notice how I'm approaching this. I'm not blaming all men on everything, and neither am I blaming all women. I'm not trying to just kind of make everybody feel good. I mean, this is how we're supposed to look at these things, that there are deficiencies oftentimes on both. And when we see oftentimes these examples on the internet of people just flipping off over the most simplest of things, what that is a reflection of is this absence of learning how to steward our emotions. And so here's a great example that I want to share with you. Now, in the case of Carmelo Anthony, from what we know, I mean, based on the media, we have a case of a young man who attended a track meet. He went under a tent that was not his. He was asked to leave. However, he was asked, we don't know, because none of us were there. He refused. It sounds like someone must have put his hands on them, and he said, do it again and see what happens. And so apparently maybe that happened again. We don't know. And then the next thing you know, he reaches for a knife, plunges it into the chest of this other young man, who ends up basically murdering him. Now, a lot of people just took that and just ran with it and said, yes, we got to stand up and all this. This is right. This is good and all this stuff. But, I said, no, that's not the way you resolve something. I mean, especially based on what we know, his life was not in danger. There was none of that at all. He immediately jumped to murder. I mean, how do you go from, hey, listen, just get out of my face or whatever, to I'm going to kill you? I'm trying to tell you, that's not normal. But for a lot of people, that is. And when you listen to a lot of the feedback on social media, there are many, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who didn't see anything wrong with it. What that tells me is that there too are many people who have this mindset because they themselves didn't have that balance at home. That's what made this situation such, in my opinion, just a quite unfortunate thing. I mean, on top of this young man losing his life. But on this same topic, I want to show you, if you notice, if you watch the press conference of this family, did you notice this? I mentioned this before. As I'm watching this press conference, there are only two people that were there talking. It was this preacher guy that they got to, I guess, to be the spokesperson. And then it was the mother. The mother was given full autonomy to express herself and to show how saddened she was about her son, being arrested and all the things that they had to go through as a family and all of that kind of stuff. But if you take a look in the background, who do you see in the background? It's the father. He didn't get a chance to say anything. Now, some people will look at this and say, well, hey, sometimes you're not supposed to say anything. Sometimes you're just supposed to be quiet. And, for men, it's good to be quiet. No, not in this case. This is your son. This is your son. How can any man, let me ask you this. If your son, I would never, as a father, allow any man to speak on the behalf of my son, and I'm standing right there. I'll never allow that, especially if he's in some trouble. As a father, I'm going to be the one there next to my son, regardless if he does something good or he does something that's not good. I'm going to be right there. I'm never going to allow a preacher or anybody else to come into the picture and to try to speak on his behalf. So when I saw that, it made a lot of sense to me. I said, this is a young man. When I saw this whole picture, here you have the woman who's basically allowed to fully express herself in all of her emotions. Then you had the preacher who's out here, who's basically speaking on behalf of this young man, Carmelo Anthony. Then you got the father who's basically has limited himself to the role of just being a silent figure on the stage. Now take a look at this video.
In general, don't wear their emotions on their sleeves. White culture is more, hi, good morning. It's very polite in your face, but very backstabby in the back. That is the difference between black culture and white culture. Black culture, we wear our emotions on our sleeves. We're proud to say, I don't like this, I don't like that, man, fuck this, F that. That's black culture. White culture is very, hi, good morning. I don't like you, but I'm keep smiling with you. Hi, good morning. Hi, neighbor, I don't like you. That's white culture. And like I said, a lot of you are gonna fall for that. You're gonna fall for that. It's a very difficult thing to pick up on. But once you pick up on it, it's very like, motherfucker, you smiling too much. You weird.
Now, this is really interesting. When I saw this video and I listened to him, I mean, he was saying this, you know, when he was describing black people as being people who we tend to wear our emotions on our sleeve. He was saying this as if it was some kind of flex. And while at the same time talking about white people, when he's describing them as, you know, they don't really show who they really are. They tend to hold it back or whatever, but behind those grins or whatever, they really do hate you and all of that stuff. And, you know, maybe the white people he deals with, that may be the case. But generally speaking, you know, that's the street belief that all white people tend to think this way. You know, that even though they're smiling at you, they really hate you. Now, let's just assume for a second that that's true. Let's just assume that. Well, believe it or not, now this is going to probably catch some of you off guard. But believe it or not, this is how you run a civilized society. And you may not like that. That may sound kind of strange to you, but that's kind of how you carry yourself in a civilized society. In a civilized society, it doesn't mean that everybody agrees with one another. In a civilized society, what it really means is that there is a social agreement that regardless of what our disagreements are, we're going to keep things on the up and up. We're going to keep things civil so that business can continue, so that we can go to this grocery store, we can go here, there, wherever we're. Like, for example, when I go into the mall or, you know, I'm out in the street or whatever, I might see, you know, people that live a certain lifestyle that I don't necessarily agree with. I'm not going to go across the street and tell them shame on you and how dare you doing this or that or whatever. I'm not going to do that. That's their choice. If that's how they want to live, they're not bothering me. You understand what I'm saying? So they do that. And then likewise, there have been many times that I have gone to places where I've been served by people who I know that are doing things that I personally wouldn't do. And they've treated me fair and kind or whatever it is, you know, whatever we're dealing with. I'm rarely have problems with people. And, you know, and so, but this is how you conduct a civilized society. Now, on the flip, when you have people saying that, no, as black people, we just going to tell you like it is. We just going to say it and we're going to do it right on the spot. Well, that is how you run a uncivilized society.
There are people that are going to tell you that there is not a table in which there is a seat for you. But I am here to remind you of Montgomery and those folding chairs. Let me tell you that we know how to use a chair, whether we pulling it up or we doing something else with it.
Yo! Oh, shit! Oh, shit! Oh, shit! Yo, Wally! Yo, Wally!
Because there's no guardrails. You just doing whatever comes to your mind and that's it. So yes, we kind of know what's on your mind at that moment, but in a civilized society, most people who are civil don't really care or want to know what's on your mind at that moment. You know, if we knew everything that was going on in everybody's mind at any given moment, I think none of us would be going outside. So no, this is not a flex at all. I'm not saying, here's the thing. I'm not saying that you have to be phony. It's not anything being phony. It's not being phony if you are dealing with someone that you really don't like, but you're not necessarily telling them, you're not being phony, you're being civil. That's called being civilized. That's nothing at all about that being phony. Being phony is being in denial of whatever it is that's happening. You're not in denial. You're just simply tapering it down and saying, hey, listen, I'm not going to deal with that in this format. Maybe we'll deal with it on another format offline somewhere. But this is what we see oftentimes. I'm going to play this video clip here.
I pulled over to eat some food before my class, and I just got upset because I pulled over into a white neighborhood. It's just so nice, and it just reminds me that everything is about racism. They have so much shade, so much parking. Like, it's the simple shit.
Don't listen to her. Now, this woman here, she is mad because she's in a quote-unquote white community, and there's peace. And she's saying that's racism. How is that racism? Because what this tells me is that she is used to being in an uncivilized environment where there is a lot of chaos and people just being whatever and just expressing at any given moment. That is not an environment that most human beings want to live in. Okay, so let me get to this last point. Now, this does go along with our thumbnail. You know, you see the two, the Superman and the Superwoman, the black Superman, the black Superwoman, and they're weakened by Lex Luthor. And if you take a close look at that image, at that little piece of Kryptonite, you're going to see something there. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to go into details in that. And I wanted to present an image of how many black folks, we will portray ourselves as that the world is based on, we're the centerpiece of the earth. You know, everything in the world rests upon our shoulders. The world is trying to be like us, and you know, it's just whatever, right? But with all of this so-called, you know, power that we have that nobody appreciates, it's quite interesting that one little word, and that word that ends in the ER, that version of it, somehow will cause black folks to just lose it.
What about the baby? What about the baby? Because technically, that baby is going to grow up and be part of the goddamn Triple K. That baby might grow up to be Hitler. That baby is going to grow up and probably be the worst of the worst out there in the world. And you know what? I don't want that baby policing children that look like me. I don't want that baby growing up doing anything else that to people that look like me, all because it was taught that. But since, unfortunately, CPS is not going to be able to do nothing, what should we do? I think you guys should let me know in the comments, because part of my thinking was, fuck it, start a GoFundMe, you know, raise about $1 million, go slap the hell out that baby.
Have you heard of the name Shallow Hendrix? If you haven't, I'm bringing quite big attention to her today. She is your new American white hero. And guess what she's accredited with, guys? For calling a 5-year-old autism boy the N-word. Yes, you heard me right.
A lot of you waiting for Christ to come back would call him the N-word to his face. I posted a video yesterday of a grown woman calling a child the N-word, and I got cope like this. Quote, the black kid stole from her, so she called him who he was. Free speech is not a crime. Stealing is. Well, the child's a child. I don't know the exact age, but let's say under 10, so yeah.
You guys are really assholes. The fact that you guys have raised $500,000 for the racist trash that was calling a little black kid the N-word at the park multiple times is beyond me.
And the thing about it is, it's really a ridiculous thing. I mean, over the years, I've always thought about this whole argument. You know, you could say the N-word with an AH at the end, or with the A at the end, if you're black, or if you've been invited to the cookout. But if you say it and you're white, but it ends in the ER, then no, you're being racist and I'm going to cut your head off. What sense does that even make? I mean, seriously, who takes a word like that and dissects it and says, okay, well, this piece of crap is okay. I got a big old turd right here. And if you use this part of the turd, it's okay. But if you use that part of the turd, it ain't okay. This part of the turd, okay, with the corn in it, nah, you know, you good. This part of the turd that don't have the corn in it, nah, you can't do that. This is exactly what this whole argument looks like. I mean, seriously. That's exactly what it looks like. Silly, stupid. But see, this gets back to what I was saying earlier in this video. Real men, when it comes to words alone, we don't melt at that. I don't. If somebody says something, I just shared a story literally the other day. My wife and daughter, they were out for a walk. This is just recently. And there was some kids, some Mexican kids, they were on their little electric bike or whatever, yelled out, called them the N-word with the ER at the end. And they were on their electric bike, so they took off. So, they little punk little kids. So, they weren't trying to catch smoke from anybody, But the way I responded to that, I could have easily have used this platform and go into a full story time. And I'm going to tell you how dare, these people do this and this is whatever. I wrote a whole piece on our community board, here in Arizona, and just went through the whole situation and instead and made it very clear that, yeah, this is quite unfortunate. But what I did was I used the situation to encourage parents, regardless of what your background is number one, be mindful of what you say in your house because your children, they're going to repeat it. That's number one. And that was really the big thing that I said. And then number two, I made it very clear that nobody over here is suffering from PTSD. However, I also made it clear that if it does happen again, they are going to be introduced to the wrong one. You know what I'm saying? So I made that very clear too. Do you know how many likes I had on that? I'm closing in on 200. Do you know how many impressions people saw that post I did? I'm closing in on 10,000 people in this part of Arizona where I live. 10,000. And like I said, the overwhelming majority of people, and I made it very clear, I said, I'm not asking for a community apology. Don't want one. I just want people, you need to mind what you say in your house. And the overwhelming majority of people all throughout this community apologize. They didn't have to, but they were apologizing. Now, I could have handled that much, much differently and be all in my emotions and say, we're going to do a march and how, I'm not doing any of that. Instead, I choose to be civil. And civil it does not mean that you're burying your emotions and all that stuff. No, I want to be civil. And part of being civil is finding ways to express yourself in such a way that's controlled, but at the same time, you're able to use your emotions to weave in your messaging when you're talking about these topics. So generally speaking, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, men in general, when it comes to just words alone, it's not enough really that's going to, when you're dealing with men that are solid, you understand what I'm saying? When they don't have emotional breakage, when they don't have emotional damage, so you could say anything to that man all you want. He's not going to get up and start swinging at you. That's, again, when you're dealing with a man that is not broken. However, when you are dealing with a man that is broken, then yes, you can say whatever, and most likely he gonna go off on you. And the same thing with women too. Now, here's a point that I want to bring up that's related to that. Isn't it interesting that we have this long tradition, particularly when in this, what we call the so-called black community, that we'll say something like this. Now, you could talk about anybody in my family. You could talk about my cousins. You could talk about my dog. You could talk about so-and-so. You could talk about this. You could talk about that. But don't you talk about my mama. Ain't that something? We'll say that all the time. Don't you dare talk about my mama. Now, isn't that interesting? Because psychologically, we see the mother as the breaking point, that's the line that you don't cross that. Because why? She's the one that gives us our emotions. She's the one that's the emotional side of us. And so when we say that, we're acknowledging that you don't even bother touching my emotions. So we're not really saying mama or mother. We're really saying, don't touch my emotions. That's really what you're saying. Because if you touch my emotions, it's a whole wrap. Now, when was the last time you hear somebody say, you could talk about my mama, you could talk about my brothers, you could talk about my sister, you could talk about my cousins and them, you could talk about my pastor, but don't you say anything about my father. Have you ever heard anybody say anything like that? No, I've never heard that. I've never heard that. I'm sure there's some people saying, I've said it, but generally speaking, you've never heard anybody say that. Why? Because it's understood that a father, or words alone, he'll be able to take it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you see where I'm getting at? So to conclude what I'm saying here, you have the father or the man who's born with this innate ability to be able to navigate through emotions. We're all emotional people, regardless if you're a man or a woman. So we're all, but with a man, we're given this ability to, even in heightened situations, we're able to navigate through our own emotions to get to real solutions. Again, that's if you're dealing with a man who is not dealing with emotion, doesn't have any emotional breakage, right? On the woman's side, she is born with this innate ability to be able to read the room, as like I say, or to use her emotions to be sensitive to the environment, to be sensitive of other people. And as a mother, she gives that to her children. That is her contribution to her children, be it sons or daughters. This is something that we need, both parts. And when both parts come together, you have whole people, which leads to whole communities. But when you see a community full of people that will just go off on any given moment, what we are really seeing is a community that was created by people who are broken on the inside because they have never learned the value of emotions and how to navigate through them. I hope you got something out of this video. Thank you so much for watching. You take care, and I'll see you in the next time.